Hello there. It's Clark M. Smith here, director and co-writer of C2. This is a brand new commentary. It's now July of 2018, and I have vowed to do this and not repeat anything in the old commentary I did to the old version of the movie, which was back in '99, nearly 20 years ago. So this movie is just over 20 years. We had the premiere party in early 1998, and it's 2018 now. So this new edited version really shows how I envisioned doing the opening. It's got nice credits, professional looking, not the PowerPoint ones we had back then, and just a really limited means of doing anything. This movie's got a lot of color correction. The camera had a lot of problems with the fall colors back then, and I didn't always white balance. I didn't always have time. I was always worried about running out of power, and that camera used up a lot of power. I had to wear this big, huge belt all the time, which was full of battery packs. This opening scene, editing-wise, isn't too different from the original. He punches Scully, and all of it's pretty much the same. But again, it's color-corrected. We have a whole new music score. I wanted to get rid of the John Williams and the James Newton Howard score I had used. I did keep the John Williams as exactly how it was in the upcoming zombie fence scene. That was so perfect, and everything about that scene was edited perfectly. I didn't really touch that at all. But I couldn't just edit it again and duplicate exactly how it used to be shot for shot. There's just no fun in that. I kind of just went in here and I pretended like it had never been edited before. I grabbed all this raw footage, followed the script, and just edited again from scratch. And it's for the most part, it's a pretty entirely different film now. I think it's a pretty significant improvement. So to give you a little history, though, before I even met Eric, I always thought doing a sequel to Contamination would be fun. It was my old 1987 college film project, and we were going to do this very short, similar to the old one, which is about 8 minutes, and do another sort of short 8-minute movie that didn't have a lot to say other than just repeating, for the most part, the same story in a different way out in Connecticut. And I just thought that would be fun to do with Pete and Greg, and just do it out in the wilderness or something. So that slowly but surely turned into the humongous project that it became, and that's because Eric entered the picture. Eric is the one. He's the reason it's a 40-minute long movie. He's the one that fleshed out the characters and wanted to do the whole backstory. I mean, he kind of took Contamination 1 and just ran with it and made a whole backstory, future story, everything about it. Originally, I had written the first treatment of Contamination back when it was just going to be a short little thing, like the first one, where it was going to be a husband and wife, which kind of evolved into Conti and Tammy here. And they were running around in the woods having just escaped some kind of apocalyptic zombie outbreak from the water after the events of the first film. And they end up in this cabin, and it turns out that the owner of the cabin is in fact contaminated, and he offers them a glass of water, and that's what makes them realize he's contaminated, and they barely escape with their lives. And interestingly enough, that actor was going to be played by a gentleman who I can't remember his name. In my mind, I wanted him to be this character in the cabin. We did our premiere party at his house, and he was a part of the group, and he passed away. I forget why or from what. Good 15 years ago, sadly, he passed away. But we had the premiere party at his house, and it was a great night. But ironically, he was my first pick to be in the movie as the sort of contaminated antagonist. but he never was in the movie at all. So that's how that happened. When I met Eric and Janice and I showed them a film I did in college called Arizona Smith, they just went bananas over it. They loved it, and it kind of convinced them, I think, especially him. He says, he said, I want to do a short film with you. Let's do something. And I'm not really sure why it ended up being the sequel to Contamination. It's kind of an odd choice, really. I mean, why not do something original, unique, and just on its own, original entity? But so with that in mind, it probably was me who proposed it, because I had already been thinking about doing it, and I had just come off a subpar experience on a film called Bloodline. And every time I do a movie that I'm not happy with or don't think is very good, I feel a lot of pressure to do something that is good and come back from that experience. And it's happened twice. I've made two films I'm very not happy with, and it's always stressful to go into your next one when that happens. You know, the old Hollywood thing where they say you're only as good as your last project.
Excuse me? What are you talking about?
This conference room scene is quite a bit different from the original. This is a particularly difficult type of scene to edit back in the day when we had to do tape-to-tape editing. And it was very limited, and you kind of had to do some guesswork and bounce around from tape to tape to tape. And this scene probably took the longest of any scene to edit back then, because you're a slave to rewinding, fast forwarding, you're just lining it up in order. It's linear editing. So now when you do it as non-linear editing, what a lifesaver. So this scene I put a lot of effort into, and had at my disposal all the clips, and I was able to make it a much tighter, much better scene. This is one of the joys of nonlinear editing when you redo a project like this. This scene can now really come to life as you wanted it to. Because the other problem with linear editing is it's nearly impossible, if not totally impossible, to go back and change anything. You're lining it up in order, and you can't really change a shot 5 shots back. You can't. Otherwise, you have to do everything in order after that 5 shot and erase everything in front of it. Anyway, but sadly enough, C2 was meant to be a springboard for me and Eric to do more short films together. Both of us directing different ones to come, but it never happened. After C2, I started putting together my first nonlinear film, which is called Distant Echoes. Finished that in '99, a year after this film. And I wanted Eric to star in that. He wasn't able to commit. I went to Ralph. He wasn't able to commit. And oddly enough, Mark said he would do it. I hadn't asked Mark until after I'd already asked Gregorio. And Gregorio and I agreed that we'd do it. He said yes, so Mark would have done it, but Greg kind of beat him to it. And I didn't know if Mark, I didn't go to him first because I didn't really feel like he was in love with this movie or the whole experience. And that's why I'm actually pleasantly surprised to actually hear, you'll see on this DVD, an interview he sent to me about how much he really enjoyed the experience and would like to do another film if he's ever on the West Coast ever again. I'd love to do it. But so Greg did it, and that was the end of my working relationship with most of these guys on future projects. Greg and Pete and Lloyd and of course Benny Jablonski here in the conference room had a nice role in my feature, The Ethereal Plane, when we did that in 2001. Otherwise, I never worked with these guys again, and Eric and I stayed friends, but we kind of went our separate ways professionally. We did a music video, which wasn't very great. Did some corporate stuff here and there, but we never did do another narrative short, which is too bad. He was going to do this thing called Velvet Elvi, and he had a lot of passion for it, and I really wish he had done it. I was going to serve as the cinematographer, which is something I wanted to do at the time, and really focus on good camera work. Because I did all the camera work, 98% of it, on C2. And I was definitely wanting to just focus on the camera only. It's tough to do both.
You don't look too happy these days.
I'm alright, Nick.
You know, it kind of occurred to me watching this that it almost seems like Shun, played by Eric, maybe sent Nate in here to snoop. Not necessarily this scene, but the scene where he's coming back from lunch with his wife, and he's in there snooping. It almost seems like Shun may have put him up to that and see what he's up to, and there's a lot of mistrust. This is the alternate take of him calling. We had a problem doing this originally because he didn't have his coat on, but I fixed it with a simple dissolve to show the passage of time. Originally, we had to redo this phone call scene and didn't have the picture and he couldn't touch it and all that, so that's better. Here's my wife, Leilani, doing her small role as the server. Just had our 22nd anniversary. Don't have any idea why she can still stand me, but if she does, we're still doing movies together.
And I'm going to have a Caesar salad and a hamburger, medium rare.
Okay.
I realize not a lot of people get the whole water joke. Hopefully if you will watch the first Contamination, I'm talking about the first Contamination, not the first version of C2, but the whole business about don't drink the water is really fantastically put into this scene as kind of a joke. He can't stand the term have some water, and that's exactly what happens in the first movie, and that's what Leilani says here.
Really tough.
I thought they did a pretty good job in this scene. A lot of tough lingo, it's a lot of dialogue, a couple pages worth. And, I wasn't too hot of a director at that time. I just kind of let them do their thing, and I didn't give them a whole lot of input or advice or opinion. In fact, for this scene, on Janice's angle, I'm sitting behind them because we needed an extra to be back there, as if the restaurant was full, and I couldn't actually hear any of their discussion. I couldn't hear any of it. When they were done, they just turned around and said, "We're done," and so we just moved on. So I didn't even get to watch or listen to the performance. It's not such a good thing to do when you're a director, and I've certainly gotten better since then. I was nervous with these guys, and people I'd never worked with before, and really out of my comfort zone, way out of it. And I didn't know them personally that well either, quite yet, in '97. A lot of this stuff has been color corrected. And I also, one of the things I regretted was I had wanted Mark to add more narration to this, and I actually had prepared some. The very last day that we shot him, I think was his scene at home when he has the drink in the kitchen. I had brought some more dialogue for him to record, and he had to go, or he bailed or something, and that was the end of it. You have to understand that we were just absolutely burnt out by the time this was wrapping up. I mean, this was weekend after weekend after weekend. Such a long time to film this movie. And it is the second most ambitious film I've ever worked on. And I've made about 17, 18 shorts now, give or take a few other side things like a music video and an entire feature. And this is second to the feature. So you'll notice quite a bit of, quiet parts in this flashback. It should be a lot more discussion. I really wanted him to be able to record. I had a lot more explanation to do. I wonder where I put it. I must have it somewhere. He added narration here to really, I could have made a choice in just cutting a lot of this out so that the narration would sort of go with it more. But especially with this version, I wanted to showcase everything we shot. And not to be at the expense of making it long and dull and just cramming every scene we did in it. But I wanted to definitely utilize everything that we filmed the way it was intended to be in the movie, in the script.
What's wrong with him?
look good. Somebody better call somebody.
Leilani shot all this stuff, obviously, because I'm in it. My goatee and all that. This is towards the end of filming. It was very cold. Pretty good scene. Went well with the flashback narration. Lloyd was in a film before this called Bloodline, as I mentioned, and before that he was in a movie called Anonymity that we made back in '89. This is the last time I got to work with him. So 3 films with him. Greg ended up being the lead in the next film and was a supporting part in The Ethereal Plane, and that was it for him. Pete was in a couple of those as well, and he wound up being in something I did called Shutting Down. The last film with him I did in 2008. I think I'm going to be able to put that on this DVD.
Within the next 2 weeks,
The original music score was pretty good, but it was just, I didn't have a lot of control over it, not a lot of time. This time I really, went to my music library. I keep a lot of composers handy for this very thing. And nowadays I have an actual composer, but, for these old movies I'm still using existing score from other movies. Most of the film here is by Marco Beltrami. And he's really amazing. He's got a lot of great stuff. I don't know offhand which of these movies it's from. This, of course, is clips from the original Contamination. And it was nice the way we were able to incorporate them into the new one.
Contaminants, and were contaminated themselves. The brass began to fear this would get out beyond the community.
I was pretty adamant about, like I said, using every deleted scene that we had and putting it in the movie, not being concerned about length or anything. We really got nothing to prove this time. Oh, and by the way, this shot with Eric has never been seen before. It was never in the original. I don't know why. It's a really terrific shot, and it really flows nicely into the narrative. I may have put in a little too much SWAT team stuff here. Again, I wanted to use all the stuff that we shot without sacrificing, any pacing and length to the whole film. I found a lot of footage I didn't remember filming, and it was really cool, and I decided to put it in. Would have been nice if there were zombies walking around and more SWAT team guys and the whole bit, but hopefully you really can't tell, and even though it's just 2 guys doing this thing, it's supposed to be an entire team. We had fun doing this scene for the most part. A little stressful walking around in the neighborhood with guns. I'm wondering what the neighbors were thinking. You can see something on my belt right there. That's one of those car DVD player face plates that we used to have to avoid being stolen. Because if they would steal it without the faceplate, it was useless. So I carried that everywhere I went. I've been ripped off far too many times in my life, and I don't even think they have those anymore. These 2 guys show up in a lost interview clip I had found. Didn't realize that Eric had shot at some point, and it's nice to include some of this lost footage into this DVD. In fact, a lot of the clips you're going to see in something called Storage Area B, cleverly enough, is a bunch of behind-the-scenes stuff that never did make it into the C2 behind the camera video that we made back then. So it's additional stuff no one's ever seen. Luckily I have all the tapes, kept them all safe and sound, brought them out, captured them. Humongous ordeal, to be honest. Filled up my computer hard drive, and that's one reason I'm trying to get this thing out the door and sent out to some people. I need to free up some hard drive space. It's humongous amount of data. And you know, honestly, Ralph and Ralph and Eric were going to do a commentary or some kind of skit perhaps on video. They didn't, and I gave them a good year to do it, gave up. I really didn't want to miss what is right now the 20th anniversary of this movie. Another reason I just want to get it done and out the door. I understand it's not that important. It's an old dinosaur of a project, and so I just, moved on without him. No big deal. There's plenty of stuff on here that people can look at and hopefully enjoy. It's amazing that this scene here at the table even works, because if you watch the bloopers, there was just laughing and goofing around, and so hard to get it done without cracking up, and very stressful when you're an amateur actor trying to do this stuff and not laugh and whatever. But that's the scene there that I kind of thought Ralph was sent in there to snoop. Why else would he be doing it? What's his impetus? We don't really know. You see, when he sits down here to be able to dissolve, another, example of the passage of time where he would be asleep enough to go into this nightmare. And simple things like dissolves you just couldn't do back then. And the biggest thing is color correction that I was able to do in this movie. If you look at the original, you should notice how bad the raw footage really did look in a lot of places. This scene here is really the favorite of mine. The dream come true to actually make this scene like I would have wanted to do it then. Sirens blaring, lights flashing, it kind of emotes the whole end of Alien when Ripley's running around the ship and there's flashing strobes and lights and the sound. It's almost like a submarine alarm. So this scene really, elevates the scene. The whole movie, I think, really cool. I'm so glad I could add these. And I don't, some people have accused me of doing like the George Lucas treatment, where you take an old movie and you rework it and you add stuff that wasn't there. And I hate what George Lucas did, the whole Jabba the Hutt and all that other nonsense in the first 3 Star Wars, and adding CG creatures in here and there. Don't like that at all. This is not the same thing. This movie, all movies are a ton of work out in the field. A ton of work. And to just wind up with this shoddy edit, 3rd generation, after all that work, is absolutely unacceptable to me. So I didn't want to just edit it and have it be exactly like it was. I wanted to make it a special thing and just do it from scratch. So adding sirens and different effects and dissolves is absolutely what this movie deserves and should have. And I'm more than happy to make the changes that I couldn't do then, didn't know how to do then, didn't have time to do then. Now we do. This is one of my favorite shots, where we put the camera right through the car. Pretty cool. Scenes like this can be edited much tighter. Give it a lot more chaos feeling to it than how it was originally. With faster editing, you really couldn't do, quick cutting worth a darn back then. And a lot of this forest stuff coming up was just dark. Kind of my fault for the most part. I shot it that way. I could have opened up the iris on the camera, but some of the stuff came out so dark we absolutely couldn't use it back then. But nowadays I can brighten it up. Unfortunately, the dark footage doesn't capture well, and you can see a lot of artifacts and kind of a static effect. And that's from my capture card trying to make sense of the darks and then of course when you brighten it up, it even makes it look worse. But I wanted to use some of this footage that we couldn't use before, because it was a lot of work and not too bad if it wasn't dark. So I've brightened it up, a lot of color correction. There's a scene coming up once we reach the fence that was just blue and like pink almost. This horrible unbalanced colors that the camera would do, and it would get confused from the fall colors. And we were out there. We were supposed to white balance on a card for every single take and every shot, because I couldn't leave the camera on. I had to turn it off between takes to save power, and I just didn't remember or couldn't be bothered with the white balance. Hoping, I don't know what I thought. I just hoped for the best. And when I got home, I was like, "Oh, this footage looks horrible." It didn't even have any green quality to it, like the forest is here. So I was able to, and you'll see it in a minute, it's a pretty big improvement. The greens are back, everything looks pretty natural. This stuff here, obviously, is super dark, and I brightened it up as much as I could. That whole thing with Scully there wasn't in the original version. A lot of this running stuff was not in the original. He's got that line about, "That's no way to treat your friendly water delivery man." I love that, and that wasn't in it before. I'm pretty sure it was not.
Even already? Party's just started. Look, drinks have arrived.
I think there's a pretty obvious clue that this second nightmare is in fact a nightmare. We did a pretty good job of sort of concealing it for the most part. When he goes to sleep and wakes up to the alarms, I don't think you realize it's a nightmare. But that being said, this entire scene, once again, he's separated from Tammy. He's in a forest environment. He gets attacked by the contaminant. He nearly gets drowned by the contaminant. And it's really, in many ways, a repeat of the opening scene, much, much bigger. And so the clue is there that it's a nightmare, but yet I think audiences, for the most part, don't realize they're in a nightmare until he wakes up and sees his flask of booze back in his office. You see, this stuff here is green and normal looking. And it was just so bad. A minute ago, there was a shot of Janice standing up, and it was a clip I had discovered. One of the behind-the-scenes cameras filming her doing this scene, and it cut together so well for this, as if she was being watched by someone, and it was a neat discovery to insert that little shot. It's about a minute ago if you back it up. It was never in the film before. Yeah, for as much work as this scene was, with this tripod thing we did up in the air and the whole bit, all these people, these wonderful people doing this over and over, I got home and it just looked terrible. The white balance. So 20 years later, what a dream come true to be able to fix it. What a perfect, it makes it all worthwhile that we can finally fix this movie. And it was a wreck. It was the most work I've ever had to do. And I've done a lot of films, all of my college films prior to Distant Echoes, which was done on the computer. All the ones prior to that, done tape-to-tape editing, I've redone. I've recaptured from scratch, and so it looks good, clean, no more third-generation garbage that I had to give out to everyone. I re-edited everything, put it on DVD with all the special features. And this C2 is the last one. I saved the biggest for last. The last one I've given the whole digital re-edit treatment to. And, I can't stop there. I add different special features, some other clips never before seen, so nothing's repeated from the first stuff that was given out, including this new commentary that I'm surprised you're even listening to. Honestly, the other one I did in '99 to the original version of C2 is pretty good. I was tempted to just leave it on here and make it sort of fit, but it wouldn't have fit because it's so vastly different. Oh, you know what? I want to mention Dream Theater. I want to apologize to everyone for cramming Dream Theater music down our throats at this time. My favorite band of all time, the progressive rock band, and I just shoehorned it into this scene and also the ending scene, and it also appears in the behind the scenes video we made. It doesn't fit. I really hate rock soundtrack, pop music, in movies. It just becomes instantly dated, and I was so happy to replace it with actual score by Marco Beltrami in this scene. And listen to the music. It's really excellent choice, if I don't say so myself. It really shows his madness and his frustration, and it's so much better than that darn Dream Theater music. I'm sorry that I used that. I'm sorry that I thought it was appropriate. It wasn't. And at the time when I edited the scene, I wasn't planning on using the Dream Theater song. I mean, I'm talking about the ending in Grand Central Station now. I wasn't going to use Dream Theater, but when I tested it and it kind of fit time-wise, I said, yeah, let's use this. But I regret it now, and I'm so glad that we can use. It just makes the movie better. Dream Theater is not soundtrack music. It doesn't belong in a movie, much as I love the guys. I've seen them in concert about 15 times. You know, Ralph really is an awesome performance. He changed a lot in this movie. Here he is, the slow, sort of mentally deficient janitor. And then coming up at the end, he's this witty, sharp guy in New York. Very different. So it's really cool the way he has that arc. I think he might have the biggest arc in the entire movie. And he's kind of an unsung hero in this movie, acting-wise. That people don't necessarily give him credit for.
You'll learn everything you want to know about it. Nate?
Originally, at the end, we were going to have a super twist where it was going to be Scully at the end, I guess, either giving out water or receiving water from Ralph. We thought that's just too twisty. You know, it was Leilani that pointed out a couple of years ago that she always thought that the contaminant was like Conti's alter ego. You know, like he's the one that wants this to succeed, that wants to make the water work at all costs, even if it's got casualties. And he's sort of the devil on that shoulder, and then Conti is the angel on the other. And it kind of is. It's kind of neat because he's a character that doesn't exist in real life, and he's his alter ego. And he battles them, and it's like he's fighting his own internal demons. And every time he has a nightmare, he has this dream of this character. We don't know why he happens to look like Scully, but he does, and that's kind of what that's about. It's a little weird. I've never had a dream or a recurring dream that had a character in it repeating over and over that doesn't exist in real life. But you know, that's how we did it. Here is the music, and this is much better version if you ask me. It's got this almost French horn, somber sounding music as Ralph comes up to the camera here. And what? No more Dream Theater. So this is kind of a nice one-er shot. Ralph coming out. We come over to the bum in the street. I wasn't really into it too much then, but I really love one-ers now, that the active camera moving around actors and stuff instead of just so much cutting. For the ending music here, we instead of the Dream Theater and then it goes into the Tangerine Dream credits, I wanted to revert back to the original theme of Contamination 1, which is music from the 1982 film The Thing, the theme from The Thing by Ennio Morricone. And I thought it was a nice way to tie in the opening credits as well as the first film. This is also an alternate take where we pan up to the sky and fade out. That wasn't the take we used in the original version. I thought it was a neat way to end it, and it really shows, like, apocalyptic ending. Not a nice ending. I would have loved to. I always, over the years, wanted to do a C3 and really wrap up the movie and give it a real ending, because neither movie has much of an ending. This weird music here at the end was just something I put together on Pete's synthesizer in the mid-90s, and I thought it would be nice to put in something personal. Eric and I were, in fact, going to do the score for this movie. I don't know why we didn't. Lost interest, didn't have time, or whatever. But, I think there's a story there that could really tie in the whole thing and have a C3. or combine all three shorts into one big feature story. Anyway, I thank you for listening to this new commentary. Figured it might as well be time. It's been 19 years since I did the last one for that really bad version. So thanks again for listening and watching the new one. I'm thrilled I could provide this new DVD to the cast and crew as a way to say thanks for making this movie happen and all of your incredible hard work. Bye.